So today, like every other week that I've done, we're going to dive into a specific topic. And the month of January, as you know, is all related to the theme of vitality. How do we sustain a healthy level of heartfelt, mental, emotional, physical? And also, the last week of this month, I'm going to be tapping into the topic of environmental vitality, which is a super important topic right now, because what I am seeing occurring is that things are changing. Things are changing in our health due to the fact that we may or may not have access to excellent food. And so that's environmental vitality, to really talk about the environment and to start to pay attention, even with more care, with more attention to what we're eating, to read the labels, to move away from all types of processed foods because they are playing havoc in our lives. So good morning. Good morning, everyone. Hi, Shalalexi. Yes, you are in New York City. Welcome. Good morning, Lori. Yeah, rainy Florida. Oh, that's right. Today is a holiday. I certainly don't want to not mention Martin Luther King Day. So happy Martin Luther King Day to all of you. And thank you for being here. And so we're going to go right in and tap into our topic of the week, which is to explore how do we increase mental and emotional vitality. Super important, because throughout our lives, for sure, there are times when we will feel less vitality. We will feel less connected to our life force. And today I want to go a little bit deeper into discussing that topic and recognize also where it might be stemming from. And if you read my newsletter last week, I shared a little bit about my own struggles in developing emotional vitality. For many of us, in fact, I'd say probably most of us, there has been a disconnect in our caregiving years when we were growing up, when we were little children, as to how to evolve as secure, balanced, and emotionally nurtured beings. The foundation of emotional connection built during our childhood, of course, plays a pivotal role in shaping how we are going to show up as adults, and especially in our relationships as adults. So when we lack experience, or when we experience a lack of emotional support during our formative years, we can develop coping mechanisms that, while initially were adaptive and appropriate at the time, often lead to unhealthy patterns in adulthood. And excuse me, one common manifestation that I wanted to underline today is the tendency for us to become overachievers, to overcompensate for the perceived deficiency in emotional connection. And that manifests as an excessive need for attention and love in adult relationships. And I wonder if any of you can connect to this already. And I want to just mention here importantly that there's no shame, blame. I'm not looking to blame my parents or your parents or anyone. This is a natural this is a natural way of evolution, because our parents did the best that they could, and we hope that with each generation we become better and better. That's not always the case, but by knowing this now, by being able to review, so that's what I did throughout my own life. I did a lot of reviews. I went back a lot of the time. And the interesting thing is that sometimes my clients will tell me, oh my God, Anne-Marie, this is showing up again. Like, I'm still dealing with this. And the truth is that, yes, you are still dealing with a component of not having been emotionally nurtured as a child, but it shows up differently as we age. So this is a little word of encouragement for you. If you feel yourself hitting a wall with that same issue that comes up for you. So, for example, as overachievers, we can become pleasers. We want to please everyone because down deep inside, we want to be liked. We want everyone to like us. And if you've ever been in that position and you've said to yourself, no, I don't care if people like me or not, that's probably a sign that you're caught in a story of not caring that anybody likes you. Because as human beings, we develop physiologically to be in connection, in relationship with one another. So it actually does matter to us if we are liked and if we are unliked. So you may have had that experience in your life with a friend you may have broken up with a friend, or you might have gone to an evening somewhere and you didn't vibe with someone because you feel like they didn't connect with you or they were judgmental. So judgment is a big one that shows up. So just know that it's normal to have the feeling like, oh, I don't care if people like me. However, under more scrutiny and exploration, what we will discover is that, in fact, we really care a whole lot about what other people think. And so when we react in that way, when we start to feel like we don't care what other people think, we develop a certain persona as to how we are in the world. And that might show up as aloof, as literally, I can't be bothered. And we develop a lack of tolerance and compassion for others when we put on this cloak, this persona that we don't really care what people think about us. So just a little something to explore and think about as we move into our talk today. So these self-compensations, right, of not having been loved or held or nurtured or encouraged as children will develop in adulthood as a lack of self-trust. We don't really trust ourselves. We don't trust our intuition. How many times have you done something and then in retrospect, in hindsight, you look and you say, I should have listened to my intuition. So this sense of self-trust might be lacking if you were not properly nurtured growing up. And again, it's not a blame shame on parents. I want to really make that distinction very clear because we're adults now. And in fact, what I am suggesting is that we go back and nurture our little child, the inner child work, that we become our parents. And we can do that throughout our adulthood very, very successfully. So the ways that it could manifest is this lack of self-trust. Also, you may resonate with this, trouble with balancing well-being with ambition. So can you balance a sense of well-being? And what I mean by well-being is, I know, Lori, in your case, you've shared with us in the Facebook group when you've prepared food for yourself for the week, and that has felt really good. That's really an example of you mothering yourself, of taking care of your food for the week, because we have busy lives and we're working and we have schedules. That's a perfect example of mothering oneself, of true self-care, is to prepare your meals for the entire week. So now you're focusing on well-being as opposed to ambition. Ambition might be you put aside preparing your meals for the week, and instead you push forward and become even more involved with your work schedule, having to produce, having to show up a certain way, and grabbing a sandwich throughout the day. That is not something that you would naturally do for yourself. So this is a very important one, and see if you might identify this potential trouble with balancing, mistaking well-being with ambition. Also, it might show up as a fear of failure. So, of course, we're all afraid to fail on some level. There's always a place where we don't want to fail. We want to be outstanding. And the truth of the matter is we've all heard it and we all know it. But this space that I'm creating here for all of us to be in is to go a little bit deeper, to not be afraid, to really look in the eye of what you might consider failure. And where does that come from? Because we have all heard that to fail is to grow, right? Or failure is a lesson, an opportunity for growth. As trial as that might sound to us sometimes, we might not want to hear that. The truth is that failure is a perception. Failure is a perception, and it takes some time for us to wrap our heads around that concept. You're not, failure is indeed an opportunity for growth, for exploration. And you really, we all might want to shift our mindset into looking at things in our lives. For example, if you failed at a relationship, or you might have failed, you might feel like you have failed at caregiving yourself, maybe for an elderly parent, maybe for an animal, maybe for a sibling. And so what happens when we have this fear of failure, usually if we don't befriend that sensation, if we don't deepen our relationship with this fear of failure, it's that it actually becomes us. There's no separation between the belief and the action. So we start to act through life as if we're afraid to fail. And so therefore we overcompensate in other areas of our lives. And that looks like showing up as perfect. We're perfect. We're on time. We're well dressed. We know the piece. We know what we have to do. We are very mindful not to get into conversations where we might look wrong or be wrong. And if we are wrong, we tend to take a stance of stoicism. We get stoic, like, no, I'm not wrong, and then we get into arguments and it gets complicated. So befriending your relationship with failure, what you perceive as failure, that's really the language to explore. Fear of failure is your perception. There's no such thing per se. Fear is only, if you go behind fear also, if we sit behind the curtain of fear, what shows up there is usually a fear of not being loved. There is sometimes some sadness that we can tap into in that zone behind the curtain of fear. So what I'm asking you to explore with me here today is to go behind the curtains of those more gross emotions, like fear, or having to be perfect all the time, or having to be the life of the party all the time, feeling like you need to speak to everyone in the room so that you're interactive and people will like you. And this can also happen in circles where it's much more quiet. So the other side of that coin is that when we are afraid to show up as our authentic selves, a lot of the time we tend to retract. We'll move back into ourselves. We'll go behind the curtain for fear of being seen. That's another extension of that possibility. So I want you to share with me here if any of this resonates. Have you ever had that experience? Maybe write a comment. Let me know if that resonates for you. Okay, so I wanted to go a little bit deeper into this relationship of overachiever, of becoming an overachiever. And what I found out for myself is that I'm not even aware of it a lot of the time. So over time, as we learn to nurture and love and support ourselves, have compassion for ourselves, be more patient with ourselves, we'll start to see how we actually act in the world. And when you have that vision of insight, that's a really good place to start to befriend those behaviors, not to knock them down, not to make them bad, but instead the opposite, to start to befriend your so-called those parts of you that you might not like as much, or those failures, or how you show up as a perfectionist, or how you go all out and then you come back home and you're exhausted for that evening or for the next day even. So to slowly start to see in particular, what is this overachiever? Overachiever in desiring love, desiring attention, desiring connection. So one of the things that a behavior that happens when we become overachievers in our lives, or we notice that other people in our lives are caught in that pattern, what will tend to emerge as a result of being an overachiever, examples of unhealthy beliefs and patterns that tend to emerge as a result of being an overachiever in your life can look like fear of abandonment. Fear of abandonment. So, what happens when we lack emotional support in childhood? We can develop a deep seated fear of being abandoned in our lives. And so what happens is we develop these clingy behaviors. We develop these needs to be constantly reassured, an inability to tolerate any perceived distance in relationships. Nelson, if you can, would be very helpful if you could actually upload that to the talk right now. So if you can please do that for me now. These two are the same, dear. So please upload the other document that I sent you. It'll be easier for everyone to follow. So I'm just going to repeat that for everyone, okay? Because it's a big one. Fear of abandonment. When you overachieve in life, when you're always striving to overachieve, it's really due to the lack of emotional support that you did not receive in your life. And so specifically, it becomes a deep-seated fear for abandonment. But what will result is clingy behavior. So notice in your life, do you tend to cling? You tend to grasp, and it's not just in relationships, although it's more easily seen in relationships, but it can also be with food. It can also be with drinking, with alcohol. It can also be with recreational drugs. It can also be with exercise, where we cling to something and we have to do it over and over again in order to help us to get through those difficult moments. So fear of abandonment is a really big one. And you might want to write these down for yourself so that you can reflect and contemplate upon those later on. The other one I talked about already is people pleasing. Have you noticed that this is something that's important for you? And if you immediately reject the idea, I'd like for you to sit with it just for a moment, because we can become people pleasers. I think everyone does on some level. So when you adopt this people pleasing attitude, what it is, in fact, is that you're seeking for approval and validation from others. And honestly, we all want approval and validation from others. We all want to be loved. There is a line between people pleasing and healthily requiring, asking for validation and love. So people pleasing often is a belief that your worth is contingent upon external affirmation, that you are only able to be loved or acceptable if people from the outside accept you. And so this can be very difficult, because a lot of the time we really don't get that acceptance from people on the outside, even though we really want it. It doesn't show up. So take a moment to really explore that if you have that people pleasing, it's very insidious. It's not always so plain to see. So just take a moment to look into that, into yourself, and see, do you have a pleaser in you based on the fact that you need external approval? And again, there's a balance there. External approval is not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing. I love it when my friends tell me I'm great, or you did such a great job with this, Anne-Marie. That feels very healthy. It's when we cross the line of a healthy balance, when we go beyond that, it can be extremely unhealthy. So just to notice that. Another one is self-worth dependency. Adults who lacked emotional support as children may tie their self-worth to external factors. This is a big one. Success. What do you consider to be success? Appearance. How do you look? And social status. And when we depend on external validation this way, this can oftentimes result in a fragile sense of self-esteem. So essentially what we're saying is that we're putting on this cloak, we're putting on this persona, this appearance, because what is behind the veil of that one is that we're not enough. We're not enough. So to really start to do your own exploration in your journal writing, in your meditation time, a little bit deeper inside, because the truth is that we all feel like we're not enough at times. And what I invite you into these circles is to start to slow down a little bit and ask yourself the real questions, tenderly, lovingly, kindly, so that the answers might arise the same way as if you were taking your own little child by the hand and going for a walk in the park, to really nurture this relationship with kindness and with patience. Another one, okay, so self-worth dependency, right? How we look, how we are externally. Another one is, this is a big one for many of us, is having difficulty with setting boundaries. Difficulty with setting boundaries and parameters. So what happens a lot of the time is we have this big need for attention or connection. And what we'll do is that we'll either get into a relationship way too quickly, because we haven't yet understood what our present boundaries are. And you know, these of course develop in real time with our partners. We develop boundaries, we develop how to be in couple and relationship with one another. But this is also about work. This is also with your family boundaries. So if you've had a lack of emotional support when you were growing up, you may have difficulties in establishing boundaries and maintaining those healthy boundaries. You can struggle to assert your own needs, and you could tolerate unhealthy behaviors in relationships to avoid conflict or rejection. Rejection is a big one. How many of us have felt rejected in our lives, or whether it was true or not, right? Because a lot of the time rejection has a lot to do with how we interpret what has occurred. And a lot of the time it has to do with how the other person is acting in relationship to us. So what I want to say here is that it's never one or the other only. We are in constant contact, in constant communication, in constant energetic circles with other people. And so there's always a back and forth in reactivity, in perceiving things a certain way, which is a perception and not necessarily the truth. So how you see things in life, it's valid. It's just not the truth. It's valid for you and must be honored 100%. However, just know that, give it a little space in the sense of understand that it's not the truth. It might be your truth, and that's fair, but it's not the truth. So again, integrating this part of tolerance and kindness and developing your active listening skills so that we might better communicate with people from a stronger center, from being more grounded, more connected with ourselves. And finally, what might develop if you're an overachiever in your life? And if you're always giving, and if you're always going and pushing a whole lot, you may develop an intense need for intimacy. Your life might become very lonely in the role of this overdoer, overachiever. Some individuals, in an attempt to compensate for emotional neglect, will develop an intense and immediate need for emotional intimacy in relationships. And of course, this leads to a pattern of rushing. That's part of the behavior, rushing into deep connections without really allowing for a gradual and healthy development of trust. And this is why so many people get hurt. This is why people come back and say, oh, this person, really hurt me. It's this person's fault that we broke up, or this person was this way or that way. I'm not saying that other people don't have their own challenges. We all do. It's when you start to do the blame shame game that it's a good moment to pause and to reflect upon it. Not to make yourself the bad guy or girl, just to be able to pause and reflect when you rush into things, rush into work. Notice in your life, do you wake up in the morning and you're already rushing? Do you rush out of the door? Do you rush to have your breakfast? Do you rush to take your shower? It's been an interesting experiment for me, because I'm definitely someone who has pushed and overachieved in her life. I've put on that cloak myself. And what I noticed some years ago, when I decided, okay, that's it, I'm done rushing. Like, where am I going? Why am I rushing all the time? Because that really is an attitude, isn't it? And what I realized is that even though I was rushing, I wasn't getting anywhere faster. I wasn't getting anywhere faster. I would rarely ever miss my train just because I decided to consciously take one step at a time. So there are all these micro attitudes, patterns, behaviors that we can start to shift in our lives, contemplating on a deeper level as to what your own patterns are without blaming or shaming or being hard on yourself. This is the last thing that can help us. What we do want to look at is how overachieving and how pushing and doing more in life actually sucks our vital energy. If you want to increase your level of vitality in your life, and this has been proven and known and shared by all types of professionals, from fitness professionals to spiritual gurus, in order to cultivate more vitality in our lives, the number one step is to really understand what it means to love ourselves, to come back to center, to the basic, and to really start to understand, what does it mean to love myself? What does it mean for me to slow down and actually take some time to think about or to feel in my body how this or that made me feel? That is self-love, to really tap in on a much deeper level to yourself. Laurie says, I've seen a most of those at different times in my life and in different situations. Yeah. And thank you, Laurie, for sharing that, right? Me too. At different times of my life, different emotions, different patterns arise. And as I deepen my own spiritual practice, for example, if you can connect to a spiritual practice, and what I mean by practice is a daily practice, 5 minutes or 50 minutes, but to get into a habit and pattern of practicing every single day. And Laurie, I wonder if that's also true for you, because I know that you have a spiritual practice. So that's been a big key for me to start to move beyond my overachiever and dealing with these items that I shared with you. The fear of abandonment, for sure, people pleasing, self-worth dependency, difficulty setting boundaries, and intense need for intimacy. All of these have shown up in my life. And so one of the things that I was sharing with you that I did with my when my father passed away in 2010. Yes, Laurie, thank you. My spiritual path has definitely changed my life and my patterns. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, because they do. When you have, yeah, Lori says it helps with perspective so much. So much when you can step outside of your immediate movement, right? This, all of this that's happening in the world right now, and there's a lot going on in the world right now. And I don't know about you, but my sense is that there's always been a lot going on in the world. When my parents would talk about it, my grandparents would talk about it, it's always been a lot. And so how do we come to a place of cultivating our inner vitality to live a more pleasant, a more content lifestyle, to just be here now instead of constantly projecting, because projection also pulls us into the overachiever. So, as I shared with you in my newsletter, when my father passed away several years ago, I had to process that. Even though him and I were on very good terms in our lives, and I loved him, and we had a really great relationship, we worked on it together. When he passed away, it was really hard. I had profound grief, as I imagine most people would when the parent dies or someone that we love dies. And so I went to this practitioner and I did something called emotional freedom technique, which is a tapping technique that helps us to process emotion. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about this. So essentially, we'll do it together in a moment, but it's a very simple and holistic. Holistic means it deals from a whole person perspective. And what it does is it helps us to relieve emotion and physical distress. And as you'll see, it involves gently, and maybe some of you have done this already, but it's a gentle tapping of the fingertips on specific acupressure points on the body while focusing on and verbalizing on the issue at hand. So what is arising for you in terms of an emotional turmoil? And of course, this is derived from traditional Chinese medicine. So I want to invite you to tap with me for a little bit. And this time, I do have a PDF for this. So let me put this up here. Okay. So I hope that, please let me know if you can see this. I'm putting it up here so that we can do it together. So let me know, Shalalexi, Lori, or anyone else who's here, if you can see this, because I want us to do this together. So we're going to start, first of all, the first one, we're going to start with using your fingertips. You're going to start by tapping at the crown of your head. Okay, so if you're with me, you can do this with me now. And what we'll say is, you can read along with me on the PDF here. Even though I feel the constant need to overachieve, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then the instruction is to tap the crown of the head and say, I feel the need to overachieve. So we're going to repeat it. First, we move into acceptance, and then we just name what the issue is. So let's do it one more time. Even though I feel the constant need to overachieve, I deeply and completely accept myself. And continue tapping and simply say, I feel the need to overachieve. We will move to the second one. Okay, it helps. Yes, you can see it. As an achiever myself. Yes, I can see it. Okay, great. Thank you. So let's go to the second one. We're going to go to the eyebrow points. So we're going to tap the eyebrow points. And here, follow with me. Even with this pressure to always excel, I choose to honor my worth beyond achievements. And then continue tapping and say, the pressure to always excel. So we're going to repeat it. Even with this pressure to always excel, I choose to honor my worth beyond achievements. Continue tapping and say, the pressure to always excel. Let's move to the next one. This time, gently tap on the side of the eye or around your temple area, very gently. So together we can say, despite the belief that my value is tied to success, I embrace my inherent worthiness. And keep tapping and say, my value is tied to success. Again, let's repeat the affirmation. Despite the belief that my value is tied to success, I embrace my inherent worthiness. Keep tapping and say, my value is tied to success. Good. Let's move on to the next one. This time we're going to tap under the eyes, so very gently. Even though I fear not meeting high expectations, I am enough just as I am. Keep tapping and say, fear of not meeting expectations. Let's repeat the affirmation once more. Even though I fear not meeting high expectations, I am enough just as I am. Keep tapping and say, fear of not meeting expectations. Good. Let's keep going. This time, under the nose, right on the top lip, under the nose. And repeat with me, despite the constant drive to overachieve, I release the need for perfection. Keep tapping and say, drive to overachieve. Again, repeat the affirmation. Despite the constant drive to overachieve, I release the need for perfection. Keep tapping and say, drive to overachieve. Now we're going to tap at the chin area. So keep moving down. This time, tapping on the chin. Even with the inner achiever pushing me, I choose balance and self-compassion. Keep tapping and say, inner achiever pushing me. Let's repeat the affirmation together. Keep tapping on the chin. Even with the inner achiever pushing me, I choose balance and self-compassion. Keep tapping and say, inner overachiever pushing me. And then finally, we're going to bring the tapping to our collarbones. So lastly, the last affirmation, say it with me. Despite the belief that success defines me, I acknowledge my worth beyond achievements. Keep tapping and say, success defines me. And let's repeat that affirmation one more time. Despite the belief that success defines me, I acknowledge my worth beyond achievements. Keep tapping and repeat, success defines me. And then just stop tapping. Just take a moment to sit. Just take a moment to sit with it. Close your eyes. Just take a moment and feel what's happening in your body. Feel what's happening in your body. Just let your body rest for a moment. So this type of tapping, my friends, will help to alleviate stress, and just feel that in your body right now. It tends to alleviate stress, anxiety, and pain. And what it will do is promote emotional freedom and vitality in your body-mind. It balances the body's energy system. So we're tapping on specific points. These are nerve endings in your body, nerve endings where information is soaked up, and it helps to process the affirmation. So it will promote a sense of mindfulness, and of course, it tends to alleviate any type of issue that you're working with. So if you did it with me, and if you found it helpful, please let me know in the comments so I can get a sense. And if you did it with me and you don't find it helpful, that's okay. That's okay. It becomes a practice over time. This is what I did for 2 years. I would go to a session every single week. I had an amazing practitioner who lived in New Jersey at the time. And she really helped me to process deep feelings of grief that were arising. And just by tapping, there are other points to tap, but what I showed you today are really good ones to start tapping. So any issue that you're dealing with, you can do this tapping, and you can do, actually, if you're interested, you can also do a tapping session with me to assist you in processing any type of deep grief or those deep emotions that arise. And sometimes they arise unbeknownst to us. We don't expect them to show up. So if you ever get caught in that place and you need support in processing, you can easily make an appointment with me directly from my website so that I can support you and help you in processing the emotions, because you'll see that doing this just a few times will really assist you in dropping in your body, becoming more aware, more conscious of what you're feeling. Becoming more conscious of sensation assists us in processing it via the body. So it's out of the intellectual mind and it goes deep into the body. So I'm going to add these affirmations one more time. So you might want to take a screenshot of these. I encourage you to take a screenshot of these. So today in particular, I was talking about how to increase emotional and mental vitality. And for those of you who are maybe listening or just have come on recently, just know that any type of lack that arises in our lives as adults usually stems from something that was absent in our caregiving years. And again, not to blame, shame parents or any caregiver, it's just the natural way of human evolution. Our parents do the best that they can, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So this is a solution if you are processing deep grief or pain, uncertainty, loss, if you feel confused, to practice tapping as I just showed you and integrate that in your daily practice. All right, my friends, I hope that this has been helpful to you. I hope that it is time well spent for you. It's certainly time well spent for me. So this week, I want to encourage you. Alexi writes, very sensitive in a good way around the collarbone. Very gentle practice. Yes, very gentle practice. Thank you, Alexi. So the more you do it, right? Crown of head, top, side of eyes, underneath the eyes, top, underneath your nose, on the chin. You can also do it underneath your armpit. All of these areas are nerve ending areas that can help you to process big, heavy emotion. And the goal to this work is to get ourselves as centered and to practice this ongoingly. My belief and my experience as a practitioner for more than 20 years at this point is that anything that has consistency and sustenance and that you can keep moving, because our lives as humans, everything changes, right? It's like the Buddha says, it's completely impermanent. Everything is impermanent. Nothing stays the same. And I'm sure that you must have experienced that in your own life at this point. So these are all practices that I share with you to invite you into becoming more aware of yourself, to learn how to truly care and love yourself so that you have a happier, healthier, more vital life, and that your relationships get better and better as time goes by, because we become better and better at picking better people in our lives, because we are first and foremost in relationship with ourselves. So I hope that this makes sense. Hi, Danielle. Danielle says, felt my nervous, probably system, let go of stress. I wasn't aware I was carrying this morning. Yes, thank you, Danielle. That's beautiful. Yeah, so we let go. We totally let go. And that's what I mean. Thank you for saying that, Danielle, because we don't realize how much we're carrying, especially if we have children, especially if we have a business. We all get super caught up in the activity, in the ongoingness of life. So to take some time for yourself this week, okay? You might want to review this. It'll go up on YouTube in a moment. If you have friends, if you have people that you know that you think might benefit from this class, please invite them to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have over 200 videos that I've created over the past year alone, in the hopes that this free information can help people to move beyond areas in life where they are in pain, if people feel alone, lost, if they feel disconnected, that they might have a resource to go to. And tapping is a wonderful resource for people to go to. So again, if you're interested in having a one-on-one session with me, please sign up at artofalignmentacademy.com. We can do a tapping session or also discuss what's going on in your life. If it is overwhelming at this time and you need support, just know that you're not alone. Thanks, AMD. Be well. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate you both for being here. And next week, I'm going to move into the topic of how to cultivate vitality through physical fitness and also through postural alignment. Did you know that so many of us have developed patterns of walking, of sitting, of reading, of being on the computer that is really lacking from a position of posture, that we don't know how to get out of bad posture because we've accumulated negative or poor behaviors that actually impinge upon our respiratory system, our musculoskeletal system, our lymphatic system, our vagus nerve. So next week, I'm moving into postural physical movement in relationship to increasing vitality in your life. So I hope that this was helpful. I will look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for being here with me today. Be well, be good, be kind to yourself. Thank you too, Charles Alexis. Bye for now.